Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming back at you with another Black Powder boot camp. And we're going to be talking about victory and defeat. This is basically winning and losing the game. Now, how is that determined? How do you decide if you've won or lost the game? Well, there's a couple of different ways you can go about doing this.
You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
A lot of scenarios will have objectives with victory points. Like if you hold an objective, you get so many victory points. And for every unit destroyed, you get so many victory points and things like this. But there's also like head-to-head matches that you and your opponent might just set up on both sides of the table and just slug it out as like a meeting engagement. And also you want to know if your units are disordered, shaken, broken, if the brigade is broken, or if the army is broken. If the army is broken, then your army has fled the table and your opponent wins. And remember, as in most rules in the Black Powder game, they are really just a guideline. The whole book's really just a guideline. It's up to you and your gaming club to kind of come up with your own scenario rules or your own victory conditions and things like that. But these are just general guidelines on how to conduct it. And this is how brigade morale works. Okay, so you've got a brigade out here. Now I've got a mixed brigade. I've got the 27th Dutch Jaegers, got the 8th Dutch Militia, and I have a Belgian line unit here, along with the Highlanders. And we're going to consider this one, and the general and the cannon. I'm going to consider this one brigade on the table just to kind of give you an example. So brigade morale. Remember that morale is never a die roll. You don't roll morale. Like you don't, like, as your units are taking casualties, you don't reach a certain point where you have to roll dice to determine if they continue. That is not the case. It's a clearly defined value. They either do continue or they don't continue. And how you determine that is like this. Now, once a brigade has suffered very many casualties, or it has partially abandoned the battlefield, the fighting spirit of the remaining units are likely to be affected. Okay, so at the start of your side's turn, if half or more of the total units, infantry and cavalry, are broken, then all remaining units in the brigade are obliged to be broken brigades. So what that means is this unit is all infantry. I didn't put any cav out. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, not counting artillery. So that means if 2 or more of these units became broken, then the brigade as a whole is considered broken. Now, once a brigade is broken, it remains broken and can never recover from being broken. So once a brigade is broken, they're pretty much done for. I mentioned earlier in another video that if your brigade is broken, you'll just pick up the units and take them off the table. You don't need to do that, especially if you're on the defense, because even though your broken units are ineffective in fighting, they still do fight and they still do shoot, even though they're ineffective. So keep them on the table as long as you can, even though they are broken. Now, they must abide by these rules. A unit is considered lost. To help determine whether a unit is considered broken for the purposes of brigade morale, it's lost if it's been removed from the battlefield because it has been destroyed, or it has left the battlefield either deliberately or otherwise, basically charged off the table or was forced off the table with a retreat. Or if it's shaken at the start of its turn. So this is what I find to be really overlooked by a lot of players, is hypothetically if that unit is shaken and that unit is shaken at the start of the turn, this brigade is broken because half or more are shaken or destroyed or removed from the table, then the brigade is broken. We usually ignore artillery pieces when working out whether a brigade is broken or not, although they can be counted if it's something like an artillery grand battery or something. Like it's a brigade composed entirely of artillery, then yeah, you're going to count them. So here's the example in the book. For example, if a brigade consists of 3 infantry, 2 cavalry, and 2 guns, then it is broken once 3 infantry or cavalry units are lost. 3 being the smallest number, that is half or more, then 5. In this case, the guns are simply ignored. If the brigade contains 4 guns and 2 infantry, then it is considered a grand battery and is broken once any 3 units are lost, including the guns, 3 being half of 6. Sometimes brigades will include tiny units representing scouts or other incidental units, and as a whole we ignore these for purposes of calculating brigade morale, like artillery. We also ignore very small battalion guns, regardless of how many might be included in a brigade. If light cavalry units are assigned to brigades, but not deployed with them at the start of the game, we also ignore these units, as they will usually fight detached from their parent brigade, and often on the other side of the battlefield. Okay, so what they're trying to say there, I'm going to summarize. Let's say that this is a brigade of infantry. It's on the table, it's fighting, but there's, in the scenario, maybe 2 turns later or something like that, a cavalry battalion will move on to the, or regiment will move on to the table, but it's considered to be part of this brigade. It's not counted towards the brigade morale. But sometimes it will be affected by brigade morale, and that will be determined by the scenario or between you and your friends. Okay, now what happens to units in a broken brigade? Like this brigade right now, it's broken because these guys are shaken. That whole brigade is broken. If this unit is destroyed and then that unit is shaken, this whole brigade is broken. So what that means is it's fairly easy to break a brigade. It makes for a faster playing game. But let's talk about what happens to units in a broken brigade. Units that have already left the table or which wish to leave the table from that point on cannot return and are deemed out of the battle for good. Units that are disordered remain disordered, and they cannot return or restore their order status even if they're elites. Like if they have a save versus disorder, they can't recover from it. Units that are shaken, like these guys, which caused the break, cannot be rallied, even if they're allowed to recover on their own from some other special rule. So once the brigade is broken, like this, they're permanently shaken. They can't, that can't come off. Units are allowed to make a single retire move in the command phase instead of using their initiative or receiving an order. They can do this even if they're disordered, in which case it's the only move they're allowed to make. Retiring units must attempt to withdraw from the fighting in the most practical manner and will leave the table if able to do so. So what they're saying is a broken brigade every turn can make one move towards the rear, their retreat zone, their edge of the table, what have you. They don't have to. They can remain in place and just stationary and like hold an objective or something like that. But if they want to move, it has to be one move towards their own table edge or their own retreat zones. Units within 12 inches of the enemy and not already engaged in hand-to-hand fighting must retire. So to get a unit off of an objective, all you got to do is move up and get within 12 inches of them, because on their turn they'll have to move back one move away from the enemy, towards their own table side. Unless they're occupying buildings or other defensible positions, or in square, in which case they can hold their ground instead, or if they're, of course, engaged in melee. Infantry units that are hopelessly surrounded and unable to retire can form square if able to do so. So it doesn't automatically eliminate you by putting someone all around you and getting within 12 inches, forcing you to retire, but you can't, so you'll be eliminated. That's what a lot of people are playing, but that's not the rule. The rule is if you get surrounded, you form square. So basically, in a nutshell, let me summarize it. Half or more guys get shaken or worse, brigade is broken. When the brigade is broken, they cannot be issued orders. They're not issued orders. You just leave them where they're at, or you advance them one move to the rear. That's it. They can shoot with a minus. Well, this guy, even though he's in a broken brigade, he's not shaken, he's not disordered, so he can still fight normally. He just can't move forward. And if you want him to move, it has to be to the rear. If an enemy gets within 12 inches, you have to move. You have to try to back up, get out of the way, unless you're holding some kind of defensible position, like a building. Or anything in my opinion that would give you a plus to shooting or melee would be considered a defensible position. Like maybe a wall. I think that would be defensible. Okay, now let's talk about army morale. We're talking about your whole table. All the troops on your side. Once half the brigades in the army are broken, then all the remaining brigades are automatically broken as well. And then the rules for broken brigades applies to the entire side. This is often the signal for the game to end. But depending on if you're defending, or if you're it's a mandatory objective that they have to accomplish by a certain turn. Let's use Quatre Bras as an example. Quatre Bras is a 4-point objective. Plus, there's unit points that you get for eliminating units, and then there's also points for troops being withdrawn off certain road edges and stuff like that. Let's say the Allies have Quatre Bras. They get the 4 points, and their army gets broken. They've caused some casualties to the French has caused casualties to the Allies, but because they hold Quatre Bras, and maybe there's only 1 or 2 more turns left in the game, they might want to continue to fight till the end, because they might get those 4-point bonus for holding that objective at the end. So it doesn't mean you have to end the game once the army is broken. It just means normally you do that, because normally there's not objectives that affect anything in the game. Now, winners and losers, right? Now, once the morale of a side has been collapsed, it's usually considered to have lost. It's a simple state of affairs. The side whose army's morale is broken loses. On occasions, it's worth carrying on for a turn or two to see if the army can inflict any similar conditions on a fragile enemy, or whether some overall objective is being held. That I just talked about. Now, driving the enemy from the battlefield is pretty decisive. Now, sometimes a battle will rage on into the night without having broken their opponent. Such undecided games can only be resolved in terms of relative success. So it'll basically be you and your opponent will you know who won. And then objectives. We're very commonly set objectives for both sides above and beyond the simple destruction of the enemy, like Quatre Bras or Rourke's Drift or El Teb, or places like that. And then if you hold them, they give you a certain number of points or something, or maybe you just win automatically if you hold it at the end of the game, stuff like that. When putting objectives on the table, it's often smart to put a time limit on there saying you have to take this objective by turn 8 or something like that. Because if you don't, then the game could go on forever without him ever taking the objective. But he says, well, I could do it in 3 more turns, so... Okay, so in summary, a brigade is broken once half its units are lost. Once you're in a broken brigade, you cannot return to the table, you stay disordered, you stay shaken, can automatically retire 1 move, must move if they get within 12 inches, and artillery unable to retire will abandon their guns. An army is broken once half the brigades are broken. Alright, thanks for coming out and checking out this video about victory and defeat in Black Powder. In the next video, we're going to be talking, I'm just going to sit down with you, we're going to talk about some of my closing thoughts about Black Powder, the rules, some actions that I've seen or played with. We're going to also, in the future video, what I'm going to do is do a supplement to these boot camps, and I'm going to talk about the Albion Triumphant Part 2 book and some of the unit special capabilities, abilities for units that specifically took place in that era that aren't in the main core book. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.